They were all shouting at me to stop. That is the part I remember, not the cold, though the cold was trying to climb into my chest and stay there, and not the sound the curse made, that low, grinding wrongness, like a millstone turning on nothing. What I remember is the whole great hall screaming one word at me: stop, stop, don't touch him, and under it the king's voice, ruined and enormous, telling me the same thing. I could not see what they were all running from. I have never been able to see anything. So I did the only thing a blind woman can do in a room full of people fleeing something she cannot find. I walked toward the sound of him. I followed the grinding to its centre, and I put out my hand into the freezing dark, and I felt for his face. Everyone in that hall was certain I was about to die. I was fairly certain of it myself. But that is the end of the story, or near it, and I have never trusted a person who tells you the end before they have earned it. Let me go back to the morning I arrived. The only healer in the kingdom stupid enough not to have heard the stories. I heard them soon enough. You cannot spend an hour in the Iron Territories without someone deciding it is their duty to frighten you. I was 24 years old, a healer's apprentice with no master left to apprentice to, and I'd been sent north because no sighted healer would go. And a blind Omega is exactly the sort of person a desperate kingdom remembers it has lying around when it has run out of braver options. That is not bitterness, it is arithmetic. I had made my peace with being the last resort a long time ago. The last resort gets sent through doors the first choice runs from, and I have found more of my life on the other side of those doors than I ever found in the safe rooms. They told me the stories in the carriage, then in the yard, then in the cold stone corridor that smelled of pine smoke and old iron and fear. Fear has a smell, sharp and metallic, and that fortress reeked of it. The king was cursed. Soren of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, carried a dark thing in him that lashed out at anyone who came too near, and no one had touched him in 3 years without paying for it. 12 healers had been sent to him in the last season alone. 12 healers had walked into his chamber. 12 healers had run out, some of them weeping. One of them, they whispered, unable to speak again for a week. And what did the curse do to them? I asked the steward walking me down, a nervous man whose heartbeat I could hear stumbling. He did not answer that. He answered a different question, which is how you know a person is frightened of the true one. You needn't go in, he said. No one would blame you. You can say the room was empty. We'll find you a bed in the village. You've brought me 4 days north to touch a man everyone else refused to touch, I said. I'm not going to travel 4 days back to tell people I lost my nerve at his door. Where is it? He stopped walking. I heard him swallow. 3rd door, he said. The end of the hall. But the king does not permit it. He'll tell you to leave. You should let him. Everyone in that hall knew which door not to open. I could hear it in the way the corridor had emptied around that end of it, the way the servants' footsteps all turned before they reached it. I was the only one who couldn't see the thing that made them turn. So I walked to the 3rd door, and I found the latch with my hand, and I let myself in. The room was cold, the way a cellar is cold, and silent. And it smelled of a man who had not let anyone near him in a very long time. Not unwashed. He was cleaner than the story deserved. But shut in, the air gone stale and unspoken. I heard him before he spoke. A great, slow breath from the far corner, the size of the breath telling me the size of the man. Get out, he said. His voice was low and worn smooth, like a step worn down by too many feet. It was trying to be terrible. It was too tired to manage it. I've come to look at whatever's wrong with you, I said, and set my satchel down by the door where I would be able to find it again. Though, I'll be honest, looking is the one thing I can't offer. You'll have to make do with the rest of me. Silence. Then, warily, "You're the healer." I'm the healer nobody wanted to send, and nobody wanted to be. I began crossing the room toward the sound of his breathing, counting my steps out of habit, my hand out to find the furniture. So, you and I are already even. Neither of us is anyone's first choice today. Stop. Sharper now. Underneath it, the first thread of something else. Not anger. Fear. He was afraid, and it was not of me. Do not come closer. You do not understand what happens, whatever they told you. They told me 12 healers ran, I said, still walking. They wouldn't tell me why, which means it's something they saw. And I want you to understand, Your Grace, before I reach you, that I have never, in my life, seen anything. Not my mother's face, not a sunrise, not one single thing anyone has ever been afraid of. So whatever it is you're wearing that sends them running, I'm the one person in your kingdom it was built wrong for. I had reached him. I could feel the heat of him, which surprised me, a cursed man. I had expected cold, and instead there was a banked, feverish warmth, like a body fighting something. And the air around him had begun to do a thing I felt on the back of my neck, a thickening, a pressure, the temperature dropping fast, as though a window had opened onto winter. That, I understood later, was the moment the curse always struck. That was the moment the 12 had recoiled. I could not recoil from a thing I could not see. So I reached up, the way I read every face I have ever known, and I laid my hand against his jaw. He went utterly still. There was a scar under my palm, an old one, running from his cheekbone toward his ear. There was a jaw clenched so hard the muscles stood out like a cord. There was 3 years of no one's hand at all, and I felt him flinch under my touch, the way a struck animal flinches, braced for a blow that, in his experience, always came. The cold hung in the air, and did not fall. I felt it hover, that grinding wrongness gathering, the pressure at its peak, the whole room holding its breath, the way I have since learned 100 people hold their breath. And because I did not flinch, because I did not gasp or pull back or make the sound of horror that it had been fed on for 3 years, it had nothing to catch on. It hung there, starving, and then, slowly, it thinned. The temperature crept back up. The grinding faded to a hum, then to nothing. I did not know any of that then. I only knew that I was holding a cursed king's face in my hand, and the terrible thing had not happened. And somewhere behind me, a person I had not known was in the room, made a sound like a sob. "Your Grace," I said, because someone had to say something, and it was not going to be him. "You have a scar that healed badly, and a jaw that's going to crack your own teeth if you keep it clenched like that. Neither of those is a curse. They're just what happens when no one's looked after you in a while." I found the other scar along his brow. "Now, are you going to tell me what actually just didn't happen, or shall I keep pretending I don't feel you shaking?" The king of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, said nothing at all. But he did not pull away. And for a man who had not been touched in 3 years, that was the loudest thing he could have done. The person behind me was Gunnar, the king's second, a big, steady man with a voice that came from low in his chest and a heartbeat I would come to trust. He had followed me in to drag me out when the screaming started. There had been no screaming. He did not seem to know what to do with a morning that had refused to go the way every morning before it had gone. How? He said. Just that. I've no idea, I said honestly, still holding the king's face. Ask him. He knows more about his own curse than I do. I only know it didn't want me. I let my hands fall, which is a first for me. Usually I'm the one nothing wants. I heard the king breathe out, long and slow, and there was something in it that had not been in any breath yet. It took me weeks to name it. It was hope, and he hated it, and he could not put it down. He told me to leave. Of course he did. The reluctant king's whole nature is to want a thing badly and fight it worse. And I would spend the next month watching a man argue with himself and lose every round in the most transparent way I have ever witnessed. He told me to leave, and then he sent Gunnar to my new quarters an hour later to ask if I would come back in the morning. I went back in the morning, and the morning after. And on the third morning, when I reached for the latch of the third door, something enormous and warm was already lying across the threshold, and I nearly broke my neck over it. That's the king's wolf, Gunnar said from down the hall, in the careful voice of a man reporting a thing he does not understand. It's been there since dawn. It won't move for anyone. It moved for you. The wolf got up, shook itself, and, I felt this rather than saw it, the great shoulder pressing gently into my hand, set itself at my side. And then it walked me down the corridor. It matched my pace. When I drifted toward a wall, it leaned into me and corrected my course. When we reached a stair, it stopped until my foot found the edge. It made itself my eyes that first morning, and every morning after. And it did this without one word from the man it belonged to, who trailed behind us in the corridor, radiating mortification like a second kind of heat. He does not do that, Soren said from 3 paces back. The wolf. It does not. It has never. It seems quite settled in the decision, I said. And the wolf huffed against my hip, in what I can only describe as agreement. And I heard the king stop walking. And I would have given a great deal to see his face just then, except that I would have given a great deal to see anything, and one learns not to keep that particular ledger. That was the wolf's opening move. It escalated with a strategist's patience. My comb went missing and turned up, Gunnar reported in strangled tones, on the king's own pillow. A warm loaf vanished from the kitchens, and was later found tucked against my door like an offering. And once, at a full council I had been summoned to only so the lords could look at the woman who touched the cursed king and lived, the wolf padded the length of the chamber, put its head in my lap in front of every noble in the territory, and looked back at its own king with an expression I did not need eyes to read, because the entire council fell silent, and then began, one by one, to laugh. I laughed too. It is a very particular thing, being chosen that openly by an animal that cannot help itself, while the man it belongs to stands rigid with dignity at the head of a council table, dying by degrees. The wolf had decided. The king was 3 years and a whole curse behind his own beast, and everyone in that room could see it but him. Not everyone was laughing. Lord Vane did not laugh. I had marked him by then. The court's high sorcerer, the man who managed the king's curse, whose voice was smooth as poured oil, and whose heartbeat, alone in that fortress, never stumbled with fear when the cold came into a room. I noticed that early. I did not understand it yet. A man who has spent 3 years near a curse that terrifies everyone, and is not afraid of it, is either very brave or knows something the frightened do not. He came to me the day after the council, in the still room I had been given, and he did not threaten me. Clever men rarely do. You have done something remarkable, child, he said, moving among my jars, and I heard him lift one and set it down a half-inch from where it had been, a small, deliberate disorder. But I must caution you against hope. The curse is not gone. It cannot be touched by ordinary means. I have spent 3 years learning that, at great cost. What you felt was a lull. They come, they pass, and when it returns worse, and it does not forgive whoever is nearest. A pause, weighted like a stone dropped down a well. It would grieve me to see a sweet, brave thing like you learn that the hard way. Some of us are simply not meant to touch him. It is kinder to accept it. He left me with that, and it did the work he intended. It sat in my chest all day. But I have handled a great many things I could not see, and I have learned to trust my hands over other people's warnings. And my hands had told me something that afternoon, in the 3rd room, that Lord Vane's smooth voice could not talk me out of. The cold had not fallen when I touched the king. It had fallen every time a healer recoiled, I asked Gunnar, and he confirmed it. The curse always struck at the moment of the flinch, never before. It did not lash out at contact. It lashed out at fear. I could not see. I could not be afraid of what I could not see. And a curse that feeds on the sight of itself has no meal in a blind woman's steady hands. I did not say this to anyone. Not yet. Some things you hold until you are sure. But it changed how I went into that room, and it changed what I was willing to risk. And it is why, when the real thing came, I did not run. The warm stones began around then. I would come to my quarters in the evening and find, on the cold stone sill where I set my hands to orient myself, a river stone warmed near a fire, smooth, round, holding heat like a small, living thing. The corridors of that fortress are frigid, and a blind woman navigates by touch, and cold stone tells you nothing but that you are cold. A warm stone, left at the turnings, at the stairheads, at my door, that is a kindness shaped exactly to a blind woman's hands, by someone who had thought about what it is to move through a dark, cold place with only your fingers to trust. I thought it was a kind servant. I said as much to Gunnar, warmly, hoping to thank whoever it was. Gunnar went very quiet and then said, "I'll pass along your thanks," in the voice of a man who has just decided not to tell you something, and I filed that away with everything else I was not yet meant to understand. The vulnerable hour came on a night I could not sleep. I went to the 3rd room without being sent because I had heard, through the floors, the sound of him not sleeping either. A wolf's restlessness, a heavy tread back and forth. I let myself in and I sat on the floor by his chair, which scandalised him, a Luna's healer on the floor, and I asked him the question no one else had dared. "When did someone last touch you?" I said. "Before me." The tread stopped. The fire ticked. When he answered, his voice had lost the worn, smooth armour entirely. 3 years. A long pause, the kind I had learned to leave alone. My sister. She was helping me with the... He stopped, started again, lower. It took her a week to speak again. She still flinches when I come into a room. She loves me, and her body flinches before her mind can stop it. And I have watched that happen every day for 3 years. The chair creaked as his weight shifted. So I stopped letting anyone near. It is not the curse I keep behind that door. It is what the curse does to the faces of people I love. I would rather be alone than watch one more person I care for learn to be afraid of me. 3 sentences passed the cap, and I let him have them. Because a man does not get to say a thing like that in 3 sentences, and I am not made of rules. That's the cruelest part of it, isn't it? I said quietly. Not that it hurts. but it teaches the people you love to fear you. I reached up in the dark and found his hand where it gripped the arm of the chair, and I laid mine over it, and I did not flinch, because I never had and never would. You've been starving yourself of every warm thing, so no one else has to be afraid. 3 years. My throat had gone tight. I let it. You absolute fool. You've been protecting the whole world from you, and no one's been protecting you from being that alone. He turned his hand over, under mine, so that we were palm to palm, and he did not speak. And I felt the great tremor go through him that a man makes when something he has held shut for 3 years shifts a single inch. The wolf came and lay against us both, warm as a hearth, and the cold never came at all. That was the night the caution went out of me, and something harder took its place. Because I understood, sitting on that cold floor with his hand in mine, that the curse had never been the enemy. Fear was the enemy. And someone in that fortress had spent 3 years making very sure that everyone stayed afraid. Teaching the king that touch was death, feeding the terror that fed the thing, keeping the strongest wolf alive, locked in a dark room, and leaning on a smooth-voiced man to survive. The lull in my hands was not a mercy the curse granted. It was proof the curse could be starved, and someone had worked very hard to make sure no one ever found that out. Who told you the curse returns worse after a lull? I asked. Who told you it can't be touched by ordinary means? Who taught you to send the healers away? The silence stretched. Vain, Soren said slowly. He has managed it since the beginning. Since it was... He stopped. Since it was laid on me. By whom? I said. Who laid it, Soren? And the king of the Iron Territories was quiet for a long, long time, because he did not know. In 3 years, no one had ever told him who cursed him. The man who managed his curse had never once found its caster. And a healer, even a blind one, learns early that the person who tends a wound forever and never lets it close is not always trying to cure you. I did not say the rest aloud. Not yet. But I got up off that floor a different woman than the one who had sat down. Lord Vane made his first open move 3 days later, and he made it in front of the court, which was his mistake, because a man that clever should have known better than to give a blind woman a room full of witnesses whose faces she could not be distracted by. He proposed a test. For the safety of the realm, he said, so smoothly, so reasonably, if the Omega Healer had truly broken the king's curse, let her prove it before the court, let the king be brought forth, and let her touch him publicly, so that all might see the kingdom's fear laid to rest. And if she could not, if the curse struck her as it had struck 12 before her, well, better it happen here, witnessed, than in some private room where hope might do more damage than truth. He was not testing me. He was staging an execution. He meant to bring the curse to its peak in a crowded hall and let 100 frightened, recoiling faces feed it to a fury no lull could hold, and let it kill me in front of everyone. And with me, the dangerous idea that the king could be touched at all. He would grieve beautifully. He would go on managing a curse no one else dared approach. And the throne would stay exactly as dependent on him as it had been for 3 years. He had built it so that any refusal from me looked like a fraud exposed. He had built it so cleverly that even the king, rising with a face like a storm, could not forbid it without seeming to admit I was a liar. So I saved him the trouble. "I'll do it," I said, into the great cold hall, before Soren could ruin himself defending me. "But not the way you've staged it, my lord. I know what you're counting on." I turned toward the sound of his oil-smooth breathing. "You're counting on the room. You want them all here, watching, terrified, because that is what you feed it. I've watched you do it for weeks. The curse doesn't strike at touch. It strikes at fear. Every healer who ran, the cold fell the instant they flinched, not the instant they reached him. You built this whole hall to be one enormous flinch." I heard, around me, the particular silence of 100 people realizing something at once. "You didn't manage his curse for 3 years, Lord Vane. You fed it." Which makes me wonder who laid it in the first place, and why the man tending it never once managed to find them. The room's fear turned all at once and turned on him. I felt it move like weather. And that is when Lord Vane stopped being smooth, because a cornered man cannot afford it, and did the thing I have opened this story with. He struck the curse himself. I do not fully understand what he did. A word, a gesture, some tether he had held all along yanked to its limit. But the cold came into that hall like a door thrown open onto the dead of winter, and the grinding wrongness rose to a scream, and the king went to his knees on the dais, with the whole thing pouring out of him at once. 3 years of fed terror unleashed to do the one thing Vane needed it to do before the court turned on him fully. Kill the blind girl and prove her wrong with her own corpse. The hall erupted. 100 people ran, and they screamed at me to run with them. "Stop! Don't touch him!" And under it the king's ruined voice, telling me the same. I could not see what they were fleeing, so I walked toward the sound of him. I followed the grinding to its centre, through a hall emptying around me, the cold trying to climb into my chest and stay. And I put out my hand into the freezing dark, and I found his face. And I held on. The cost was real. I will not pretend it wasn't. The cold did not thin the way it had in the quiet room. Vane had fed it too long, too deep, and it fought me. Frost climbed my arm. The air went to stone in my lungs and I could not get a full breath. Something in me, some deep warmth I had never had to spend before, began to gutter like a candle in wind. And I understood that a lull is cheap, that a starving takes everything you have. Because the thing was screaming for the fear I would not give it, and taking the warmth instead. "Elowen," Soren said, his hand coming up to try to push mine away, to save me, always to save me. "Elowen, let go. It will take you. Let go." "No," I said, through teeth that would not stay closed. "It's starving, Soren. Can't you feel it? It's not getting bigger, it's getting desperate. It needs me afraid, and I have never once in my whole life been able to fear a thing I couldn't see." I pressed my palm flat to his jaw, the scar under my thumb, and I found his eyes with my other hand, and I did not flinch, would not flinch. Held every line of my body still and unafraid, while the frost climbed to my shoulder. "You are not a monster. You are a man no one would touch. I can't see the curse. All I can feel is you. And you are not what they were running from. Stay with me. Let it starve." The wolf came through the frost and pressed itself against us both, warm and enormous and unafraid, one more thing in that hall that would not flinch. And the curse, with nothing left to eat, no fear in my hands, and no fear in the wolf, and the whole court now staring at Lord Vane instead of at the king, the curse guttered out. The cold broke all at once, like a fever, like a held breath let go. I heard the frost cracking as it fell from the walls. I heard, beneath my hand, the king of the Iron Territories draw the first full breath he had drawn in 3 years without something waiting inside it. And I heard Lord Vane, at the edge of the hall, try to run, and I heard Gunnar's men take him before he reached the door. They found the rest of it in his rooms, the tether, the workings, the truth. He had laid the curse himself, 3 years before, on a young king newly come to a throne Vane had expected to control. It had never been an enemy's magic. It had been his own, a leash dressed up as a doom, and he had spent 3 years tightening it and calling it care, keeping the strongest wolf alive too frightened of himself to notice the hand on the leash was the same one offering the cure. He is at the border now, stripped of his workings, exiled under a writ that says if he crosses back, the wolf settles the matter. I am told he did not go smoothly. I did not need to see it to enjoy the report. Soren came to his feet on that dais, in front of the court that had run from him, and he did the thing his wolf had been trying to make him do for a month, the thing 3 years of fear had told him he had no right to do. He took my frost-burned hand in both of his, and he raised it, and he did not care who watched. He was shaking, I felt it, the tremor of a man doing a thing that costs him everything and paying it gladly. For 3 years, he said, and his voice filled the hall. Every soul in this court has feared to touch me. This woman could not see what you feared, so she is the only one who ever saw what I actually was. His thumb moved over my ruined knuckles. My wolf chose her the first morning, without asking me. It always was ahead of me, 3 years ahead, it turns out, and right. His voice dropped, just for me, though the hall heard every word. I stopped letting anyone near, so no one would learn to be afraid of me. You walked straight in. You were the one person it was built wrong for. Stay, Elowen, not as my healer. Stay. I turned my face up toward the sound of him, and I could not see him, and I have never needed to. I told you the first morning, I said, that I was the healer nobody wanted and nobody wanted to be. I've reconsidered the second half. The whole hall leaned in to hear the blind Omega answer the king. I don't want to be anyone but the woman who walked toward you when the room ran the other way. That's not a healer's decision. It's just one you're not free to talk me out of. He kissed me then, one breath, no more. A kiss I could not see and did not need to, and what broke open in me was not the thing the poets promise. It was recognition, plain and total. The vertigo of being seen all the way down by the one man who had every reason to keep everyone in the dark, and who chose, in front of his whole kingdom, to step into the light with me instead. The wolf sat between us and thumped its tail against the stone, insufferably satisfied, and the great hall of the Iron Territories, which had come to watch a blind girl die proving a lie, watched instead the strongest wolf alive be caught at last by the one person too unafraid to know she was supposed to run. Here is the part I have been keeping. The warm stones. I asked him, that first quiet night after, who had left them, the river stones warmed at the fire, set at every turning and stairhead and door, shaped exactly to a blind woman's hands. I had thought it was a kind servant. I wanted to thank them. He did not answer for a while. And then he said, roughly, that he had noticed, the first week, how I read the cold corridors with my fingers, and how the cold told me nothing, and that a man who could not let himself be near me had needed something his hands could do for me from a distance. He had warmed them himself, every night, for weeks. The king who could not be touched, leaving warmth where my hands would find it, because it was the only tenderness he believed he was allowed. I did not say anything. I put my hand over the scar on his jaw. Some things you give a person by not making them explain. 6 months on, I'm the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still strikes me as a clerical error no one has troubled to correct. The corridors of the fortress are warm now, hearths at every turning, because the king decided his Luna would never again read a cold stone with her fingers when he could give her a warm one. And because, I suspect, he found he liked a warm house full of people who no longer flinched when he entered it. His sister does not flinch anymore. That was the first thing that healed, before the court, before the curse's last frost faded from the walls. He weeps about it sometimes, quietly, when he thinks I cannot tell. I always can. I let him think I can't. Some things you give a person by not watching, and I have never watched anyone in my life. Which makes me, I am told, uniquely qualified to be his wife. A letter came last week from the healing house that turned me out when my master died. The one that decided a blind apprentice was a liability they could ship north and forget.
They had heard, they wrote, that a blind Omega had married a king and lifted a curse 12 healers could not touch. And surely this was an error. And would I confirm it so the matter could be put to rest? I had Gunnar write the reply, since my hand for letters is poor. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace are close cousins and hard to tell apart from a distance. Easier up close, where a person can hear which one is smiling. I confirmed the rumour. I added that the curse was never the hard part. The hard part was a whole kingdom that mistook a frightened man for a monster, and that this, in my experience, is the most common curse there is, and the one no healer is ever sent for. Soren found me dictating it at his own table, in the seat at his right hand, the wolf a warm weight across both our feet. "What are you telling them?" he asked, and I felt him warming a river stone by the fire, out of pure habit, though I no longer need it, because he needs to. "The truth," I said, and reached for the warm stone, because he had made it, and a made thing wants receiving. That 12 healers walked in, and 12 healers ran out, and then the blind girl walked straight toward the one thing everyone else was running from. I closed my hand around the warmth. And that it turned out the thing was you, and you were never worth running from at all. So before I let you go, tell me what you think, because I have lived inside the question for 6 months, and I still cannot settle it. Do you believe his wolf knew, that very first morning, that a woman who could not see was the one soul the curse could never feed on? That it chose me on purpose, sure of a thing it took the rest of us a starving and an exile to prove? Or was it only a lonely, grieving beast reaching for the first hand that did not pull away? And it happened, by grace, to reach for the one hand that could save him. Tell me your theory below. I would genuinely like to know, and I cannot see your faces to guess. And if you want to stay in this world, the sister learning not to flinch, Lord Vane's empty rooms, whatever comes north through the gate next, comment the wolf and follow along, because I have made a habit of walking toward the things a room runs from, and the Iron Territories are not short of closed doors. Where are you listening from tonight? Come sit by the fire. It's warm now, we made sure of it.